Hello everyone, back to you in today's second video. We're going to have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days, or today's second video, which will take us around the 20th of January. We'll be able to extend out beyond that with the extended GFS and ESM ensembles, so to around a couple of weeks. And we'll have a look at the CFSB2 for February at the end of the video as well, of course. So JMA Friday has been released. That's a month-end look ahead with Japanese and CFSB2 models. It's taking us into February with that one too. And it looks like we're going to keep a very mild winter going for the next 4 weeks if the JMA and CFSB2 models are right, which of course is a big if, because any forecast over 5 to 7 days is fraught with large health warnings and pinches of salt. So it's just a snapshot what those two models are showing today, but they could of course look very different next week. Right, so I'll talk you through what's happening over the weekend at Gauss in a moment, or at the end of the video, but we'll start the video with what's happening in the stratosphere over the North Pole. I haven't looked at this for a couple of days. This is from the JMA. It's showing the current temperature and temperatures through this winter so far versus the average. So the grey line is the long-term temperature average. At this time of year, we should be starting to lift the temperature up now in the stratosphere over the North Pole at 10 HPA. 10 HPA is one of the highest levels of the atmosphere. We should be starting to see the temperature lifting up, and it will carry on warming, main on trend all the way through to the summer. Where we are is that we actually have lifted the temperature up from where we was like back earlier in the winter. So back in the middle of December, we was under -80 with the temperature at 10 HPA. We're now currently around -70, but that is still below average. It's still a little bit below this grey line. So the cold temperature in the stratosphere over the North Pole continues at 10 HPA. And we go a little bit lower down to 30 HPA, it gets us a little bit closer to the tropospheric level. You can see that there we have got an exceptionally cold stratosphere indeed. So again, the grey line is the trend, and we should be seeing the temperature at both 10 and 30 HPA lifting up now on trend through to the summer, where it reaches its warmest point of the year, of course. Where we are at the moment, though, is somewhere around -85 at 30 HPA. We are well below average. We're well below that grey line at the moment, and there's no sign of a temperature lifting up there. So very cold temperature at 30 HPA, and still cold on average at 10 HPA as well. So this is telling us that we've got a strong polar vortex, of course. As we know, we are going to be seeing a continuation of cold temperatures at 10 and 30 HPA. We're going to continue to power up the polar vortex. Polar vortex is going to get stronger, and it just tells us that the westerlies are probably set to continue for the foreseeable future. This is the current temperature at 10 HPA from the GFS at metrosil.fr. So where we've got these yellow and green colours here around the edges of the pole, that's where we've just lifted the temperature up a little bit. It's particularly over on the Canadian side of the Arctic at the moment. However, we are still with these deep blue and purple colours here over on our side, particular of the Arctic and the North Pole, and so that's where the coldest temperatures are running through. We can see that there's very little change really in the next few days. We do move that blue area around a little bit, so it starts off actually on our side of the pole in around sort of 6-7 days time. It's actually gone more over towards the Canadian side of the Arctic, so it is moving around a little bit. That's the polar vortex at its roots, of course, where we've got this deep blue area. It is moving around a little bit, but there's no sign of it going away. It looks like we've got a very, very strongly entrenched polar vortex this year at its roots in the stratosphere. It's going to extended range of the GFS. Again, very little sign of change up to 26th of January now. We still have those blue and purple colours. That's still over temperatures around -80 to -84 at 10 HPA. So up to the end of January, let's move this back over to 10 HPA. Up to the end of January, if that's right, we could well see this black line sort of ticking down a little bit towards the end of January. If anything, going somewhere around there, perhaps. So that would, by the end of January into beginning of February, that would be well above the, well below the grey line, I should say, much colder than you would expect the temperature to be at that point of the end of January. So there's no sign of an end to these very cold temperatures that we have in the stratosphere. That's going to continue to drive and power up the polar vortex over the next week or two, I would have thought. So there's no sign from a stratospheric point of view that we get out of this westerly winter in the foreseeable future. Central England temperature has now equalled the all-time January CT for January 1916. So we're currently standing at 7.5 now, which is almost 4 degrees above average. It's provisional to yesterday, the 9th of January. This is an exceptionally mild start to January. And as I say, if we was to hold at that level throughout the next sort of 21 days or so, if we was to hold at 7.5, then that would bring us in with January 1916, the warmest January on record within the CET record, which goes all the way back to 1659. Now, that's a big question, of course. Can we hold that central England temperature at that level for the whole month? I'll be surprised if we do, but there's nothing appreciably or very cold coming up. We may see the temperature dropping down a little bit next week, so the weather becomes a bit more volatile and the jet stream goes a little bit further south. But up to the middle of the month anyway, and beyond the middle of the month, there's no sign of anything particularly cold. I would expect this will tick down a bit, but it may hold around 7.0 right way into the sort of latter part of the month. So we will not be all that far from it, and it will only take a really mild final week or something to possibly bring that record into play. So I think it's unlikely we will beat January 1916 for the CT, but it's not out of the question, let's put it like that. It's one of those that might be a little bit touch and go by the time we get to month's end, unless we get some sort of extended period of drier, frostier weather, of course. If we do string together about 4 or 5 frosty nights, then that CT record will be totally off the table, because we'll see the temperature coming down very quickly. So it will be a case, do we start to get some frostier nights coming up? These are the GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. We're looking at Oxford today, so the red line is the 30-year upper air temperature average for Oxford. Seeing the temperature lifting up in the next day or so, going to become very mild through the course of tomorrow. In particular, then Sunday, the temperature drops down a little bit, lifts up again early next week, and then drops a little bit, then lifts up around the middle of next week, and then drops a little bit, and so on. That's very much a zonal sort of sine wave. It looks like it should even out around average, but of course at this time of year, zonality will actually bring you in above average, because even when you're in most colder sectors, it's not particularly cold, and you very rarely get much in the way of frosty nights, and it's really frosty nights that you need to properly lower the overall temperature. So that will be a mild and average week, albeit a little bit less so compared to what we've had through the first sort of week to 10 days of January. Big lift up in the temperature appearing there now. That's around the 21st to 22nd of January. It is associated with a little bit of a drier period, though, so that could be associated with high pressure. So just because the upper air temperature is lifting up doesn't necessarily mean it becomes all that mild on the surface. We may have frost or something going on there if high pressure is building in, albeit with the upper air temperatures quite mild. And then a drop down in the temperature as we get towards the last period of the month, the last days of the month. But again, that's very extended range stuff. You look at that and overall you think that it's going to be pretty mild, I think. So there's no sign of anything desperately cold showing up there. Once again, the green line, by the way, that's the operational GFS run, but I'll show you in a moment. That is on the colder side of the ensemble, as it has been quite regularly. So it's not an outlier, but it is definitely, again, on the coldest side of the GFS ensembles. Most of the ensemble members are up here in the mild or very mild category. Precipitation wise, lots more rain to come, so it's going to be drier through the rest of today, and for Oxford it will be drier tomorrow, but late tomorrow it'll turn wetter, and then those wetter conditions continue right way through into the second half of January. As I say, it might go a little bit drier there sometime around the 21st, 22nd, 23rd. We might build in some higher pressure, but even after that there's precipitation spikes still in the mix. Temperature anomalies shall be temperature 18th of January, a little bit above average, not as mild as most parts of Europe are going to be. I mean, Scandinavia is still with this anomaly around 8 to 10 degrees above average, as is much of northern Russia. So we're not as warm as that, but nevertheless, we're still slightly on the milder than average side. Precipitation anomalies for the temp to be 18th of January look like this. So close to average really through most places, although it is a bit wetter in the west and in the northwest too, but otherwise most places are near normal. So that's how the GFS looks for Monday. The next area of low pressure is rattling in on Monday. That's going to bring us a spell of heavy rain and gale force winds from Monday through to Tuesday. And we keep this very unsettled weather going into the middle of next week too. Tightly packed ice bars, so it's going to be windy. There's another low rattling in early on Thursday next week. That could bring a renewed bout of gales. And there will be some heavy rain with that one as well. Friday, week's time, we're still in this west-southwesterly wind, and then over the weekend of 18th, 19th of January, then get a little bit of a change in the pattern. The low pressure begins to ease off, start to get this ridge building out to the north and the west, so it goes a bit colder and drier over that weekend of 18th, 19th of January. That could give us a couple of frosty nights. And in fact, the GFS then does build in the high pressure quite strongly as we get through to Monday the 20th. So this is that little drier interlude that I showed you is possible on the GFS ensembles. It's quite a long way out, it's 10 days away, but that would be a drier, colder scenario. Winds coming in off the continent, so there could well be some frost, maybe some freezing fog with that. But it's not long at all before that ridge gets broken down, and then we get through to around the 22nd of January, and here we go again. We're off and running into another spell of westerly, southwesterly winds as areas of low pressure continue to move in off the Atlantic. That's how we look as far as we go. With GFS today, which is Sunday, 26th of January, still in the same broad pattern as we have been all winter, which is westerly, Atlantic driven, and certainly from the north and west, quite unsettled as well. GM looks like that, so once more, we're looking at quite a wet and windy start to next week. There will be heavy rain and potentially some gale force winds as well. That looks quite nasty for England and Wales at midnight on Wednesday. That's quite a nasty little secondary low rotating around the main low that's out to the northwest of Scotland. So gale force winds, maybe severe gales and heavy rain possible there. Into the second half next week, the Atlantic onslaught just goes on. So this is Friday the 17th of January. Low pressure again pushing in off the Atlantic. That will bring further bouts of heavy rain and strong winds too. And then running up towards day 10, same idea as what we saw with GFS. These areas of low pressure begin to weaken and ease off as a ridge starts to build from the southwest up to the northeast. In fact, it is generating a proper area of high pressure over Scandinavia there. So again, that will be rather colder as we get through to that weekend of 18th, 19th of January. And today 10, which is 20th of January, there would be risk of overnight frost with that. Maybe even a little bit of some wintry showers down the east coast. I mean, let's not get carried away. There wouldn't be much in the way of snow around, but it will certainly be rather more seasonable than we've had for a while. So again, around days 8, 9, 10, just a chance something a little bit colder, drier and frostier perhaps as that ridge builds in from the Atlantic and tries anyway to get itself up to Scandinavia. ECM looks like that, so a wet and windy start to next week, but at least it will be mild. And into the middle of next week, yes, it remains very unsettled with further showers, if not longer spells of rain. That's Friday, 17th of January, again looking very unsettled in a week's time, no end to the Atlantic onslaught. And then we go through to the weekend of 18th, 19th January. Same idea as the other two models. It does start to turn a little bit drier. We begin to lose those intense areas of low pressure. So overnight frost could start to occur there during that weekend of 18th, 19th of January. perhaps a little bit less influence from high pressure with the ECM compared to the other two. And that's how we look at day 10. Then we've got quite a big ridge sitting just to our southwest, and we're dragging in milder air already around the top of that ridge from the Atlantic. These are the options on the table within the ECM ensembles today for day 10, which gets us to the 20th of January. So we have 19 members of the ECM ensembles with low pressure up to our north and high pressure down to our south. That's going to be mild, bringing the wind from the west. 9 with high pressure ridging through the UK and trying to go in northeast as well. That could at least give us some frosty nights as we're heading towards day 10. 8 with high pressure to our east and low pressure to the west. That's drier and probably quite mild as the winds come in from the south. This one will bring winds in kind of like from a southeasterly direction, I suppose. 8 just here with high pressure centred over the top of the country. That's going to be mainly dry and frosty. And then we've got 7 with high pressure just to our west-southwest, trying to reach northeastwards. Again, that's probably going to be quite dry and frosty. So we could get a drier interlude around days 8, 9, 10. That might deliver some frost anyway, which of course is something we haven't had much of this winter so far. Then we go through to 2 weeks away, which is the 25th of January, and we have 12 members of the ECM ensembles with a ridge just out to west. Still a lot of dry weather on offer with that, probably quite mild. 10 with high pressure just to our west-southwest. That's going to be quite mild and relatively dry. 8 looking very different by the time we get through to the 25th of January. Low pressure through the country. They're going to be very unsettled. In fact, that's the sort of chart that would imply the deluge is back, but only 8 of those going that unsettled. Another 8 with low pressure up towards Iceland and Greenland, and high pressure centred somewhere over southern Scandinavia. That's going to be a drier and potentially rather colder scenario. Winds coming in off the continent. 7 with high pressure sitting over top of the country, and 7 with 6, I should say, high pressure just out to our west. So a lot of options on the table as we get to 2 weeks out. That's taking us into the last week of January, of course. Most of those scenarios, though, do still continue to have high pressure as a major player. So it still looks as though high pressure and where it's going will be the main sort of talking point about the weather and the videos as we go into the second half of the month. Where this ridge is going to be all important, as we've been saying in the videos recently. Finally, this is how the CFS V2 is looking for February. So it still has this area of above average heights in the middle of the Atlantic. So that's high pressure around the Azores. It still has low pressure up to our north around Greenland and Iceland and going on into Scandinavia. And so this continues to bring in westerlies. So for February, it's not really seeing much change compared to the pattern we had through December and through January as well. Just a continuous run of westerly winds from beginning to end during this winter, which is quite unusual. Normally you get some sort of pattern. I mean, it's 3 months worth of weather this, so normally you get some sort of pattern change within a season. It's very rare actually to have the same pattern that you start a season with as the same pattern that you finish a season with. Normally there will be some sort of pattern change, but the CFS certainly isn't seeing any difference for us and for Europe. There is one quite significant difference, so, which is for northern and eastern parts of America, because the CFS is forecasting a much colder month, where it has been a very mild winter, of course, in eastern America, but it's forecasting a much colder month for eastern and northern America than we've had so far this winter. So that jet stream is really digging southwards, and again, cold air just surging out of Canada across that eastern part of America. We also continue to see this ridge up to the northeastern part of the states, or the northwest part of the state, I should say, and up towards Alaska. So that's kind of like the pattern that we've had a lot of over the past few winters, and generally most winters have been quite mild. So the CFS is definitely seeing winter digging in across the eastern part of America for February, but over on our side of the Atlantic, it still wants to keep us in these westerly winds, and so therefore it's going for a very mild February with the CFS temperature anomaly for not just the UK but for most parts of Europe. Actually, much of northern and eastern Europe is even milder than we are out in the west of Europe. We're only a little bit above average, around a half a degree to 1 degree above average, but most parts of northern and eastern Europe in particular, and still into Russia, continue to be exceptionally mild. But notice how cold it is across much of eastern, northeastern America. But that's what I was saying, the CFS is definitely seeing winter really digging in during February on the eastern side of the states, with those winds well and truly going into the north. High pressure is up here around Alaska, of course, and that sends the jet stream on this northwest southeast alignment. I assume what the CFS is doing there with the high pressure over Alaska, a trough of low pressure coming out of Canada sitting over the eastern side of America. Jet stream is aligned northwest southeast across America, and then that jet stream comes out of America into the Atlantic, hits the oceans, the Atlantic Ocean, and the jet stream blows up the jet stream, and then we bring those areas of low pressure into the west of Europe. And that's kind of like the pattern that we had during the winter of 2013-2014. I assume that the CFS is going for that sort of pattern for February. And then finally, the CFS temperature, precipitation on, I should say, for February is close to average. It's not going for a particularly wet month, but of course, in an Atlantic-driven westerly month, you will probably expect precipitation to be above average once again. So the CFS doesn't really want to change things for February, doesn't want to deliver us into colder weather, just wants to keep the westerlies going, albeit it does change the pattern in North America to something much, much colder for the eastern and northeast parts of the states. We do have people watching in America. I'm aware of that from the viewer stats and, of course, the website stats at Gazweb. So if you're watching this and you're across the eastern parts of America and you've had a very mild winter so far, it could well be that winter is going to bite for you in a couple of weeks' time. Watch out. Maybe get the pipes lagged, because winter could well be on the way in the eastern and northeast part of the states. But over on our side of the Atlantic, there's no sign of anything particularly cold coming up for the time being. It looks like temperatures will be a little bit lower next week, purely due to jet stream coming a bit further southwards and areas of low pressure taking a little bit more of a southerly track. So it won't be as exceptionally mild around this middle part of January as it has been through the first week to 10 days of January. But nevertheless, probably still averaging out a little bit above average overall and just continuing to be very unsettled. So on and on it goes. The winter of 2019-2020 continues to be very, very unsettled, very wet, very windy, and also quite mild as well. Or very mild, I suppose I should say. Right, well, coming up tomorrow, we've got weekend forecast, of course, as well as on Saturday, we've got your weekend look ahead. We're going to have a week to 10-day video update tomorrow as well. Sunday, we've got Gazweb's Sunday Roundup coming up. There'll be a second batch of spring analogs, or spring updates, started last Sunday. Of course, we've got another batch of spring analogs coming up for you on Sunday. And we'll probably do Ensembles Watch on Sunday evening as well, because I know a few of you like that one. So keep checking back to the website through the weekend for all of the updates. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.